Good morning, Keisha. Thanks for having me here this morning, but also would like to say bonjour to my friend Andrew. Tell him that I miss him very much, and thanks for the great job from last week on this launching of the World Cities Day. And I would like to start this exercise by bringing the question asked by Andrew: how to make affordable housing a reality in Africa? So after many years that we have been implementing the SDGs, I think the question is how far do we go now in this process of addressing the need for housing of vulnerable group in Africa? And I think that's where the discussion today is very important, especially we have some emerging factor that was not planned at the beginning. So I think there's quite a dose of pessimism, happening now on the SDGs, and most complex one is this housing sector. That's why the supplement I'm bringing, in addition to the one that, my executive director had just, mentioned, is just a provocative question, just to give a turn to the discussion and to ask the tough question that how you should move with this, housing agenda in Africa. So I don't know, Keisha, you're seeing my screen, huh?
I do, thank you very much.
Yes, I think let's start with some statistics. I think these statistics come from Andrew address as well. The rapid trend of urbanization in Africa with a growing medium and intermediate city. And last year we discussed a lot about these intermediate cities, which is coming with a number of populations, but also with key challenges related to planning and management of the cities. So I think everybody know the statistic now we are facing, by 2030, how much people will be living in cities in Africa. So I think Africa has now one of the fast trend of urbanization, rate of urbanization, even less, urbanized globally speaking, which is creating, some challenges, but at the same time, you can see it as an opportunity, especially when it comes to the housing sector as a way of creating investment, but also huge demand coming along with this population growth. Key challenge mentioned by Andrew as well, informal settlement. I think that's where we can really touch, the issue of housing, when we see that 48% or, 52% of population in Sub-Saharan Africa live still in informal settlement. What does it mean? No access to decent housing, no access to water, sanitation, basic services. And we have a lot of experience, from Nairobi. And I think during this COVID-19, it has been a concern for all of us of seeing, this population living in a density, world where there is a risk of, of disease spread, and which is quite, bringing a lot of caution on how we should approach the issue of housing in an integrated manner. And this is some characteristic, of this informal settlement we're talking about. I think Kenya has become, unfortunately, a case study for all of the world in terms of informal settlement characteristic when it's come to access to durable housing, to adequate sanitation provision, to adequate, land tenure system, affordable price, water and sanitation, but also security of tenure, all are elements coming together to inform, the dedicators, of people living in informal settlement. And I know politics and private sector has a long way to go in Africa to curb this issue of informal settlement in terms of prevention, but in terms of reaction. And I already mentioned now, I think this issue of informal settlement will increase with these climate change issues, but also with insecurity coming along in different areas in Africa, Mozambique, Sahel region, where people are displaced and coming to the urban fabric, looking for heaven, for protection as well, which is creating another bottleneck, on the public services in terms of, basic infrastructure and others. So those are some, of course, we all know that the SDGs as well has elevated the issue of housing in a holistic manner through the goal 11.1, but looking as well in the connection with basic services and Islam upgrade we are talking about. I think this is, the point that we need to consider how to link these issues, of access to affordable, decent housing with the issue of basic services and informal settlement, which is quite a number of issues that African countries and cities are crippling, in many countries. The new urban agenda, of course, leave no one behind, as mentioned by Maimouna in her address, and providing equal access to adequate and affordable housing is key for attending, the goal and the spirit of the new urban agenda. That's the reason why UN Habitat has just established the platform for reporting of the new urban agenda. Is quite a tool that can help people trace progress and share lesson learned and experience on the way that we are addressing the new urban agenda. So on the strategy plan of UN Habitat, housing is at the center as key component and ingredient that can help reduce spatial inequality, but also to promote and drive sustainable urban development. And this is the integrated approach I was talking in the past, because housing is the middle of different environment where we can see as a component to promote sustainable urbanization, but also to make cities livable and agreeable for community. And this transfer of this slide I'm showing to you, leaving no one behind, because in Africa, I think this issue is quite serious, because we have 42% of the population sub-Saharan Africa below the index of poverty. So how we can cater those population in the current context of crisis? That's one question we need to ask ourselves. Looking into the issue of health now, which is a new dimension that people are integrating in a bold manner, when it comes to planning and education as well, are this element we are looking into. Data and policy ahead, how we're going to shape our policy for data is one element we want to see as well over the discussion. So assistance to those in most need, subsidized, transparency, I think this will bring us to the financing element. I think one bottleneck in Africa for this affordability of housing is financing and subsidy, but also interest rates, which were very high. How to cater this 42% of population living, below the index of poverty, I think is all question. So housing should contribute to sustainable housing and make livable cities, and has to be connected to accessibility of transport. I think we have many examples in the world where the housing scheme was not well established and creating, waste of investment in the fact that housing was put far beyond from the, area of work. And right now we are talking about 15-minute, connection in the cities, which create, another dimension on how can link to infrastructure, how to can link to security, how we can link as well to environmental sustainability with the element of green, which is very important, but also to sharing prosperity. And another element dimension is increased participation of citizens. So economic contribution, I think Africa, is looking into this housing as an engine for economic transformation. So if you look at the value chain of housing, how much job can be created, but how much sector can be developed through, this housing. I think Andrew has spoken during this address about the industrialization. This is an opportunity we have with a growing population and cities to build, on this industrialization area, which should come with a sound and decent planning system that can cater this need, but also looking into the taxation system. I think we need to look at in this element of land-based financing, land value capture, which has all elements that can contribute to increase value of the cities, but at the same time creating, a strong economic system for creating jobs, but also for catering, the social factor when it's come to health, education, but also to create more opportunity for all. This is some elements. So this is something that we need to reflect as well. We know that COVID-19 has affected our economy harshly. And in terms of economic, growth this coming years, I think the signal is too red. And we can even talk about contraction of the economy, and others countries are expecting even, minus in terms of growth. And those are Nairobi, Senegal, and others countries which are all struggling, to get out of this COVID-19. While, this financing has been always an issue for housing, now how are we going to carry over this process? And I think that's where this collaboration with private sector is very important, to look at as avenue, as paradigm that we can use to fill the gap in terms of, providing, this housing scheme. So knowing that there's quite a number of interests and important for local government and national government on that. Kenya, we are talking about this Big Four, for example, on this project for housing scheme. In Senegal, that same. I think this interest and elevation of housing in many countries, African countries, is very interesting to see this move, but at the same time, the challenge is there in terms of financing. So that's why as well, I would like to touch on this issue of poverty and inequality, which is growing after this COVID-19. How many people are facing risk of eviction? I think right now we are expecting from government to take appropriate measures in terms of subsidy, in terms of putting in place in package to help those who cannot pay any more the rent. South Africa, Senegal, Nairobi, I think there's quite a number of people who have lost their job from this COVID-19 and cannot afford any more paying their rent, and we are not talking about buying house. I think those are some considerations that we take into consideration, the context within which you are navigating now with the COVID-19, but also how you can build from the previous experience to bridge the gap, in terms of financing. That's the reason why my last slide is more about throwing on the table key question, finance of the housing sector. Even myself, I've been under transaction with some bank in Senegal. The interest rate is so high, 13% for someone who's working even for United Nations too much. How we can tighten out those who are, below this, this level of poverty, doesn't have, revenue, knowing that, informal sector in Africa is producing and occupying more than 70% of the economy. So how to cater this program, this category? Which type of financing do we need? Private sector, public sector, that's fine. But how to cater those who are below, on this bottom line of this ladder? That's another point. Another bottleneck we are facing in Africa, the issue of land. I think that sometimes people are a bit skeptical to talk about land, but we realize that land access and security is impeding a lot of investment on this housing sector. So I think it's because of the conflict between statutory and customary is one element, but also the lack of decent policy and updated policy in the land sectors are creating a lot of competition which are not controlled by the government. At the end of the day, we have unhealthy land market, which have some impact on the speculation on housing. Nairobi is one example where I think developers are, having a lot of influence on this land market. That's something we need to look at. What type of policy and what type of incentive do we need in the land sector? The third point, I think, is looking into in policy. Yes, we have been talking about housing policy, but now we realize the context has shifted with this COVID-19. So do we repurpose our policy or just revise our policy or just embedding, the issue of housing into national urban policy? In either way, I think this reflection is very important to allow government and local government to have the right approach and the right vision appropriate when it comes to access to housing, affordability. And now we have all this question, a definition of what we call the social housing, which has different interpretation depending on country, depending on person. I think we need to look at. And lastly, the data gap. I think it's very important to really see how best we can really put into place some mechanism to allow policy-based evidence, and allow these people to have, the quite, evidence needed to develop approach and policy. And that's where I think the work of this African Union financing is very important on gathering all this, existing data to help people really get a better understanding on what needs to be done in this house sector, but what is the status of the housing sector, whether it's come over from mortgage or others, element related to access to housing. Those are some elements I would like to share in addition to the presentation of Maimuna Acacia. Again, I'm happy to be here and we look forward to responding to any question. Over.
Omar, thank you very much. That was excellent. And I think these last 4 questions are ones actually that should guide our discussion over the course of the week, because they really are the intractable problems and they require the active participation of all of us. That is what makes the challenge. And I do think that that's really what the AUHF itself is trying to do, is to bring together the breadth of stakeholders to be able to negotiate around the issues as you've listed them here. We have just a little bit of time for our discussion, and I thought what I would start with is Andrew Chimponda, who is the chairman of the AUHF, the MD of Shelter Afrique, has joined us. And we're going to have a discussion among the 3 of us. We have a number of questions that have come in through the chat. But Andrew, perhaps we could just start with your reaction to the address by the Executive Director of UN Habitat and now the presentation by Omar, and tell us a little bit about your thoughts in terms of how investment into housing relates to the achievement of the SDGs, maybe some examples from Shelter Afrique's experience as well, please.
Sorry, Kesha. Thank you very much. And then maybe just to keep with Omar, we've been trying to get together to have Nyama Choma in Kenya, but I see more online than in present. So I want to commit to you, Omar, in front of the world that we will do it this month. I think before I then start, Kesha, I wanted to maybe from a French perspective for Omar, Mon cher ami Omar, je suis toujours heureux de vous voir. So I look forward to spending time with you. Je suis très content. In terms of now looking at what Madam Muma Sharif, what she presented today in terms of our strategic, our drive towards the SDGs. Firstly, to thank the Executive Director of UN Habitat, Madam Sharif, because Sustainable Development Goals is something which, as a member, Kershaw, we are very committed to. I have a daughter, 6 years. If she gets what the Sustainable Development Goal 11 is, she always gets a chocolate. So that's how serious we are, because we have to live it and we have to eat it. In terms of, this is our annual report. It's got 10 pages from page 35, dedicated to Sustainable Development Goals. I think Omar beat me to it with a beautiful presentation, which I respect, but I will just talk a bit about what Shelter Afrique, in terms of our experience, has been, because as a board, we are very committed to the attainment of the Sustainable Development Goals. The activities in Shelter Afrique in providing innovative solutions to affordable housing and, of course, the urban development challenges in Africa aligns with the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development Goals. The SDGs are a collection of 17 global goals designed to be the blueprint to achieve a better and a more sustainable future for all. So when I page through, which is really what talks about our commitment as Shelter Afrique, we look at Shelter Afrique's activities aligned to the 2030 United Nations SDGs and the new urban agenda. We are focused mainly, Kershaw, on achieving SDG 11, which focuses on ensuring access for all to adequate, safe, and affordable housing and basic services, and the upgrade of slums. That's a key part of our corporate and board-approved strategy. Of course, we observe SDG 2, 3, 4, 6, and 9, which looks at housing, driving access to basic services, and impacts profoundly on health and the well-being of low-income households. We also look at SDG 1, 5, 8, 10, 12, and 17. And also we observe SDG 7 and 13, which focus on housing delivery processes that are required to support the achievement of climate goals, improving the sustainability and affordability of housing and urban living. Now, how do we put that in a context of, in a pragmatic context? So, in all the lending we do, Kershaw, I'll give you an example. In Rugarama Park Estate, which I mentioned, I'm talking a lot about Rwanda because, of course, we are hosted by Ambassador Gatete virtually through Rwanda, but we launched a project there for 3,000 units, and we make it clear to the developer that we need to measure the impact that has in terms of the beneficiaries, the impact it has on employment. Already we know that that will achieve at least an impact of not less than 15,000 beneficiaries, and then in terms of employment, not less than 12,000. But of course, you have to split it between the two. So that is something we are focused on, which is a clear public-private partnership. So what we do when we provide the funding, we try to ensure that the data required to enable us to be able to measure the SDGs, that is agreed upfront prior to any funding. And the second level of funding we are providing in Rwanda is, of course, in Kinyinya, the Kinyinya Park Estate, which is in Rwanda, which is a project for 10,000 units, which we launched in October. And then we are looking at other projects, Soul Lagoon View Estate, which is in Ghana, and also Karibu Homes, of course, also in Nairobi. So it's a bit of a mouthful, Kershaw, but in terms of specifically what we're doing, I wanted just to direct our members to our annual report, which is on our website, which starts in page 35 to about page 44. Thank you, Kesha, for that question.
Thank you, Andrew. Omar, we had a question on the chat that came through around how is UN Habitat supporting the and motivating for the implementation of the SDGs? How are you holding colleagues to account? So those would be member states, but also the rest of us who aren't directly accountable to UN Habitat in the private sector, but certainly who rely on you quite a bit for partnership. How are you leading that effort?
Thank you very much, Keisha. I think something we need to acknowledge and to be proud of is the fact that, you know, housing comes broadly now in this, you know, sustainable development goal. I think not only on the stand alone, but as cross-cutting all the, you know, goals of these SDGs. I think that's something which is magnificent, I think, as an achievement for the housing communities. But since as well, I think UN Habitat has been busy in promoting these SDGs, and you see that the new urban agenda is a tool for implementing this SDG, especially this goal 11, which is talk about, you know, resilient and sustainable cities. So at the same time, you see, you know, housing being included in UN Habitat strategy as what we call at the center as key ingredient to attain the sustainable urbanization. So what has been done so far, I think, in tracking progress of that, UN Habitat has been supporting stakeholders to develop the methodology of data collection. I think on that we are working closely with statistical offices in many countries at the global level to make sure this methodology is participative and addressing the need for every communities. And in parallel to this methodology, I think UN Habitat has put now this platform for reporting on new urban agenda, which is a way as well of touching base on. So we can get access to these platforms through the UN Habitat website. Most importantly as well, you know that local government are involved in this process. I think that another, you know, segment we shouldn't ignore because they are playing key role in achieving the goal of these SDGs. And UN Habitat over the last year have been working with more than 40 national and local government on these particular issues of including housing in national policy, but also make sure we have the elevation of this dimension of housing. And on that, we have an opportunity of working together. We have the voluntary local review mechanism that was established. The methodology has been developed, and UN Habitat is collaborating closely with Africa, you know, the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa for the rollout of this voluntary local review at the national level. How we can work together, that's one question. But also, you know that UN Habitat has established a stakeholder group, which has been very active on learning and experience sharing as well on the global level, including African cities and others. And those have been very, successful mechanism. On the substantive side, I think something I want to share as well. Let's come to this partnership between private sector and public sector. You know that UN Habitat has established what we call the City Investment Platform, which is a platform that bring together private sector and public sector and to identify bankable projects for co-creation in this area of urbanization, sustainable urbanization. And one element where we find relevant project as an area of housing. So how we can scale up, this city investment platform, bringing more partners, but also using it as vehicle, of advancing the agenda in Africa. That's one element we need to look at as well. Lastly, I mean, heard about this participatory slab upgrading program that had been established, I think, over years. And I think there's a lot of lessons now we can learn from this participatory slab upgrading program. So knowing that, I think, so looking into the slum, we need another vision, but also a new paradigm we need to invent to see how best we can transform this informal settlement into a place for livability, but also for healthy and environmentally sustainable for communities. I think those are some elements that have been UN Habitat doing. And recent development I want to share, which is happening in West Africa with UMOA, what we call the Monetary Union of West Africa. We established the Center of Excellence for Housing with the support of World Bank. And what we are looking into this, Center of Excellence of Housing is research action development, because we want to fill the gap in terms of knowledge, but also bringing more capacity for stakeholders to be able to advance this agenda of housing. And lastly, looking at the governance element, which is very key. I think those are some elements that UN Habitat is working. And of course, it's given opportunity for collaboration. Even this morning, Andrew, I've been discussing with Mohamed Gambo and my team on one assessment we want to do on the impact of COVID-19 in the housing sector. And I think that's something that can bring a lot of effort, and a lot of initiative from, African Union, Housing Finance, and other stakeholders. And we need to carry forward this conversation. Over, Kesia. Thank you very much.
No, that's excellent, Omar. Thank you. I think what's sometimes difficult about an institution as large as UN Habitat is it's kind of hard to wrap your arms around it and figure out how to connect. I was interested in the city investment platform. Can you just mention how would somebody find that in their city?
No, I mean, right now, I think that's something which was presented, launched during the World Urban Forum, this year in Abu Dhabi. And things start with, a kind of launching and challenge of good project from cities, and municipality was compelled and invited to propose their project related to their cities, and the best project has been selected and put in the city investment platform to attract donors. It's just a starting point, and I think there's a lot of information we can share with your stakeholders as well. If you require, you can have a session on that with the team leading this city investment platform that we can work out. But now what is important is that a number of bankable projects has been identified and present to private sector and to philanthropic for engagement and for further support. I think this is a kind of co-creation with local government, with the facilitation of UN Habitat, with the donors and a philanthropic organization. Over.
Wonderful. That sounds like a really good initiative, and I think it would be great to get more information to share, just to build those points of connection. That would be great. Yes. One other question that came through the chat, and then I'm going to have a question for both of you as we conclude, but very quickly, Omar, the question that came through the chat was, how do we retrofit appropriate spatial planning to informal settlements? So how do you manage that? Andrew, don't go away. We have one last question for all of us.
Okay, sure.
No, I mean, since I took over on this new position as director of for Africa, because before I was working on the land sectors, I was leading the global land to network, and the perspective was more looking into the tennis aspect. Yeah. But when you get closer to the issue of informal settlement, you realize that it's a complex matter. And I think people have been doing a lot of restructuring, of this informal settlement. I think there's quite a good practice that have been successful somewhere, but it's a case-by-case basis. We cannot generalize what to work in Senegal and bring in Kenya, because what is required, first of all, it requires tough decision. That's why we need political will as well, engaging on this informal settlement, because it's not just about coming and put a borehole and putting a water pipe. It's about looking at the spatial dimension, the social dimension, and the environmental dimension. All these elements have to combine. That's the reason why we are talking about UN Habitat as a new concept of regeneration of informal settlement. Regeneration in the fact that you need to offer alternative place as well in terms of access to decent, land, but also access to tennis security. So what are those alternatives that exist, which require a holistic approach to the issue of informal settlement as well. Secondly, as well, the social adhesion of communities. How to bring communities to agree on this principle of relocation or regeneration of informal settlement. Unfortunately, most of the time where you see informal settlement, because people are driven or attracted by jobs and being close to the center of interest in the cities. So you cannot get away from the, where they can find a job. So it means that at the end of the day, we need to look at the economic dimension, how to create an opportunity of job for these communities, at the same time, making sure that they have a way of investing. That's why the subsidies is very important. On the particular element, in addition to the spatial dimension, UN Habitat is in this process of this slum upgrading. We have what we call the community funds. It's a way of empowering finances of communities through some different contributions they can get, and from there they can go to this incremental housing system or owner-driven housing system. From there they can invest themselves. I think those are some mechanisms we need to look at as well in the funding system. So we shouldn't consider this spatial element of informal settlement as standalone. It should be connected with others, and now we cannot do it without this environmental and the green dimension, which is very important as well. Overall, I think in UN Habitat, yes, I mean, we are developing a new approach on this informal settlement, which is quite looking to spatial dimension, social dimension, and also in the tennis security. I hope I respond to the question, but I'm sure there's a lot we can do on this particular area. That's why some discussion I have is Edgar from this Center of Research. We need to have a forum and really take stock on how much has been done on this informal settlement and what are the new practices you need to promote and to elevate to get in the new paradigm for, preventing this informal settlement. Over. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Omar. And I realize we've just hit the edge of time. And Andrew, you're needed on the session stage now because you are moderating the next conversation. Would you like to do a very quick 15-second response in terms of what do you need, Andrew, from UN Habitat in order to achieve these SDGs in the next 10 years?
Okay, thank you, Kersha. Look, I have to thank Omar. We're working very closely with him and his team through our Center of Excellence, which, as he said, is headed by Dr. Mohammed Gambo. So we are getting the cooperation, we're getting the collaboration. Like with anything, it's all about good ideas, but they need to be funded. It's not so much what we need from UN Habitat, it's so much what the members and the governments can give UN Habitat to capacitate them to do more, because I do believe that through UN Habitat, as a continent, we can achieve a lot more. Thank you, Kesha.
Thank you so much, Andrew. Thank you, Omar. This was a really good discussion. Omar, please also extend our thanks to the executive director, and we really, really appreciated her address this morning. Can I now urge everyone here to choose one of the sessions? There are two sessions that are in parallel at the moment. Stream A, government efforts towards affordable housing in Ghana, Egypt, and South Africa. And our chairman, Mr. Andrew Chimponda, will be moderating that session. And then Stream B, affordable housing in Rwanda, and that will be moderated by Yanko Chitsima, who's the business development director of Shelter Afrique. Please don't panic if you can't choose. We will be recording these, and then we'll share the recordings so you can look at them later as well. But please find your way to a session and participate in the chat. Thank you very much, both of you, for making this such a good opening session for this conference. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Kersha. It was an utmost pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Andrea. We look forward to seeing you soon. Thank you very much.
Sure,
We'll catch up in the afternoon. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you.